As shaky as the MCU Disney Plus shows have been, some of them have been pretty good. However, there's always the problem of even the good ones not really ending too well. WandaVision was very unique and engrossing right up until the finale, where it mostly devolved into a big CGI fight with some really bad dialogue mixed in. Falcon and the Winter Soldier's finale portrayed Captain America as a terrorist sympathizer. Hawkeye's finale had a Kingpin appearance that was strictly inferior to every single appearance he ever had on Netflix. What If's finale was nowhere near as good as the penultimate episode. Moon Knight's was similar to WandaVision in devolving into a big CGI fight, while any potential left in Secret Invasion was gone by the time the finale had concluded. The one and only exception was Loki Season 1, which had a finale that, while not the best episode of the season, and can be criticized for how heavy it is on the exposition and low on the action, it did make for a unique, thought-provoking, and certainly very meaningful finale that had a larger effect on the multiverse saga than any other project. And yet, while sitting at an 8.6, it is tied for the second lowest rated episode of the season. The one and only Disney Plus show where the finale was the best episode of the season in my opinion is Ms. Marvel, but that's not really saying much since the show itself is not very good. There has never been a finale to a Disney Plus Marvel show that was both fantastic and the best episode of that season. That is, until now. Loki Season 2, in my humble opinion, didn't just live up to expectations, but actually surpassed them, in a season full of expertly written dialogue, interesting storytelling, powerful character development, and fantastic world building. And that's just in the writing. That doesn't even mention the acting, which was superb, the music, which is some of Marvel's best, the visuals, which were at times mind-blowing, and hell, even the comedy. The season could be really funny at times. All of this leads into the finale, although if I'm being honest, it's like a three-part finale starting at episode 4, which is where the season truly blew me away for the first time, specifically in the insane ending. Episode 5 continued that, and also had an insane ending in its own right, and that leads into the finale, titled Glorious Purpose, which is extremely fitting, but also kind of crazy considering the first episode of the series has the same title. I don't think I've ever seen that happen before, but I guess it fits the timey-wimey, sometimes time loop nature of the show. The episode began with the Marvel intro being played in reverse, which was similarly fitting and not at all expected, but we are then treated to the single best episode of TV that Marvel Studios has ever produced. Starting with some epic music and visuals, leading right back into the events of episode 4, with Loki, now having mastered his time slipping, replacing his younger self and trying again to save the TVA and the multiverse. From there, we get a classic time loop storyline, which is always fun. It's like one of my favorite tropes in movies and TV shows, but this one is actually really unique in that it is not a man who's found himself in a time loop he needs to get out of and then learns a lesson along the way. It's a man who's deliberately placed himself into a time loop-like situation in an effort to achieve a goal, and an extremely selfless one at that. And then, the execution here is absolutely flawless. The writing is really funny and clever, the music is extremely fitting, Tom Hiddleston's frustrated performance is great, and the centuries later section of the episode gained a genuine gasp out of me. It's such an interesting idea for someone who's been utterly separated from time to be able to master any and all expertise with absolutely no time lost, especially for someone who's thousands of years old. So for them, 100 years or so, or a few hundred years even, is probably equivalent to, let's say, a decade for us. So while it's a long time, it's not an incomprehensible amount of time for them. It would have been cool to see a tiny bit of these centuries, maybe in a short montage, but that's nothing more than a nitpick. This title card was basically almost entirely as effective. The amount of time that Loki has now gone through makes the rest of the episode more effective as well. It makes the inevitable futility of making something bigger to accommodate infinity feel even more frustrating. As Loki said later on, what a waste of time, as it's just from his perspective that time has even passed. I will say though, not realizing earlier than this that the timelines are infinite, so the loom being bigger doesn't do anything, is probably my one and only actual complaint with this episode, since it's something that I personally realized weeks ago. It also may be a complaint with the season in general. Then again, it's possible that the TVA simply never saw the multiverse as infinite, seeing as they've been able to do their jobs at all. Either way, I would not say it's a big enough issue to take away from the episode, but it is probably my biggest issue with it. The episode then takes a huge turn away from the central conflict of the last few episodes, all the way back to the conflict of the season 1 finale, as Loki's full control over time is used to its full extent, and he's allowed to completely give up on whatever goal he had. Then, we get yet another self-imposed time loop, and while it starts with a similar idea to the first of completing a goal, this time convincing Sylvie to not kill kill He Who Remains, it then morphs into more of an inner conflict of whether or not Loki should kill Sylvie. Obviously, Loki from before this show probably wouldn't have hesitated to kill her. The series up until this point has given Loki such fantastic character development that, yeah, I do fully believe this inner conflict. The show has fully earned it as an effective and meaningful final conflict of the series, or rather, it's the impossible choice of either killing Sylvie, which will destroy everything but the sacred timeline, or allowing Sylvie to kill He Who Remains, which will lead to a war that will destroy everything. It is technically the same conflict as the season 1 finale, but now with more context or the actual ramifications of Sylvie's decision, but also with a completely separate conclusion. I would also like to express how well I think they handled this part of the episode, Loki getting tired of going through the same thing over and over again, given the ultimatum of how he'll have to kill Sylvie by Sylvie to stop her, so he just lets her go. And the use of He Who Remains' line from season 1's finale, "See you soon," which has now been recontextualized to be addressing Loki directly, who he knows is in this loop. It makes the entire series feel planned out from the start, which it may very well have been. It was either planned exactly this way and executed perfectly, or the writers were able to cleverly use a line from a previous season in a completely different way. Either way, color me impressed. The small twist that Loki has fully mastered control over even other people's time and has been through this conversation before was brilliant. It also shows Loki to be even more powerful than He Who Remains, who needs to use that rock or whatever that is to control Sylvie's time, while Loki just does it with his hand. He Who Remains is such a fun yet terrifying presence, and hell, even the aesthetic of the Citadel at the end of time is great. There's nothing about these scenes I don't love. In an effort to figure out what to do, Loki returns to the first episode in a very series finale move to gain advice from Mobius. While Mobius not being more confused than he is in and of itself very confusing, the writing of the scene beyond that is fantastic, from the interesting dilemma of the baby Hitler-like story that Mobius tells, to lines like "most purpose is more burden than glory," which is maybe my favorite line from the entire show, to then describing living with that burden as scar tissue. It's absolutely brilliant and so insightful to Loki's dilemma. With some great performances from Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson, we then get to the opposite perspective to Mobius's "sometimes you have to make the hard decisions," as Sylvie tells Loki that sometimes it's fine to let things die, that maybe death is better than not having free will. This dilemma is legitimately thought-provoking, adding these separate perspectives from the people closest to Loki with the ethereal music and idiosyncratic visuals in the background, which leads directly into the show's peak and some of the best moments in the MCU ever. Loki decides to forgo the dilemma entirely and take the burden of glorious purpose on for himself, taking Loki's MCU character arc full circle from the first Thor movie and also the Avengers, but Loki repeats a line from the first Thor movie that, again, beautifully recontextualizes it to fit Loki's character progression. From there, we get some of the most visually stunning imagery in the MCU's history, with some of the best music I've ever heard in a Marvel project, in a scene where Loki gains a raggedy and run-down new Loki outfit, which fits his new perspective on his glorious purpose, with the classic horns that seem to be made out of the same material as the Citadel at the end of time, fitting the new role as well. In a scene where the main character simply pulls some ropes up some stairs and then sits down, we get the single most powerful moment from any Marvel Disney Plus show ever. The visuals, the music, the climax of the character development, the juxtaposition of Loki's initial goal of self-satisfying rule, now boiling down to a selfless sacrifice, is absolutely brilliant. It's not a hero versus villain CGI slugfest, it's not a bland, not well thought out conclusion that has plagued the MCU's shows. It's a unique, distinct, and perfect conclusion to Loki's arc. And if that wasn't enough, this turns the multiverse into Yggdrasil, the Norse world tree, which is a visual treat and such a cool reveal. The fact that Loki doubles as a Yggdrasil origin story makes the fact that it's a Norse god at the center of this multiverse story that much more significant, which is so cool. For a lot of this show, despite the fact that I liked it a lot, it kind of has felt like Loki never needed to be the main character. It could have been a lot of other characters, and they chose Loki because he was very popular and they were able to. Now that the multiverse is Yggdrasil, looking back, and this is a retroactive addition, it needed to be a Norse god, or at the very least a Norse character, and Loki was definitely the best fit. So this episode, I think, retroactively makes every other episode in this series just marginally better than it already was. And beyond that, I can't tell you how much this scene made me appreciate the character and show of Loki even more than I did. I don't think any other Marvel character has gone through better character development in the MCU, and I don't think any other Disney Plus show comes close to this quality. This is what I wanted Disney Plus Marvel to be, this high quality, high budget, amazing looking and well thought out TV that adds to the universe, and Loki's the only one that I think absolutely perfected that. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that this episode cemented Loki as the second best Marvel show ever, only behind Daredevil, while cementing Loki as one of the best characters in the MCU. Proving yet again its superiority over the rest of the Disney Plus finales, this episode is 56 minutes long. I'm pretty sure that's the longest episode that Marvel Studios has produced, and this allows the episode to take a significant amount of time to wrap everything up after the conflict has ended, establishing the TVA's new role of keeping King variants in check, even with a nice reference to Quantumania, giving some nice low-stake talks between some of our main characters, OB writing a new handbook, Victor Timely not getting the handbook, Renslayer being pruned and potentially set up for something else, Sylvie being given her freedom, Mobius letting time go by, and Loki finding peace in his burden, smiling after hearing his friend's words from one of the infinite amount of timelines he now holds. What a goddamn perfect ending to this show. I'm always for seeing more of something good. I'm definitely not one of the people who says that the MCU should have ended after Endgame, and this show more than any other holds significance to the saga, but I'll be honest, I really wouldn't mind if Loki remains in the background forever holding to his burden, Sylvie remains free, and Mobius retires. I've come to love these characters over the course of these 12 episodes, but this finale is so perfect for the story and characters that it could absolutely end here, and it's not just that. It's no secret that Jonathan Majors is going through some legal trouble right now with an impending trial that will all but determine whether or not he will return to the MCU depending on the verdict. They could certainly recast, but they might not want to. King hasn't exactly inspired the same hype that Thanos has. Quantumania definitely saw to that. They may very well just want to simply retire King as the big bad and pivot to someone like Doctor Doom or Galactus, and this finale gives them a good opportunity to do so. The Kings are still out there and are definitely a threat, but they could easily just say that the TVA is succeeding in their main goal and are keeping the Kings in check, allowing them to move on to something else. I personally would like to see King's story follow through with. The Loki show specifically has made me way more interested than I otherwise would have been, and I know that I think Deadpool 3 is continuing this storyline, but I also think that Jonathan Majors brought so much to that role, especially with He Who Remains, King the Conqueror, and Victor Timely, that I don't necessarily think it'd be worth it without him, and I do think that Deadpool 3 could simply be setting up something else entirely. Regardless, that doesn't really matter about the quality of the finale. Season 2's finale, which is also seemingly the series finale, is the perfect ending to both the season and the show, perfectly capping off the storyline of the show, Loki's character development, and potentially, if they want to, the whole King story arc. Possessing everything that the show has always done well, like great writing, great visuals, great music, and great acting, Loki gives us the very first finale to a Disney Plus show that is the best episode of the season. It's also the best episode of the show, and the best episode of any Marvel Studios project, and deserves a 10 out of 10 rating. If you were wondering the ratings I'd give to the other 5 episodes of the season, they are now on screen. This gives the season an average that could be rounded up to an 8.7, although I'd say it's actually better than the sum of its parts. So I'd give the season a rating of a 9 out of 10, making it an easy top 10 MCU project of all time.